In this video, we're going to talk about the importance of using wrist gestures or movements at the piano. So let's go ahead and jump right in. This is going to be a two-part video because I don't really want to make a video that's like 25 minutes long. So in this first part, we are going to talk about how wrist gestures can help us basically stay loose at the keyboard and can help from building tension. And then in the second part, we're going to talk about using wrist gestures to play multiple voices in one hand and also how to sort of navigate complex passage work. So I always think that it's important for you, the viewer at home, to just, go to a keyboard and just experience what this feels like, okay? So if I just play a note, okay, and I can just sit right here, okay? So maybe if you do that, you have a certain amount of tension, maybe you don't. But what I want you to experience is if I play a note and then I actually circle with my wrist and arm like this while keeping that note down, notice the difference there. Now there's a couple things that you might experience. If this feels really like tight and angular and like kind of hurts, okay, that's a problem. Okay, what that means is that you're actually gripping or pressing into that key so hard that you're wasting a ton of effort. Okay, that's probably going to be largely why you struggle at the keyboard, or at least a reason. You should be able to play this note and very loosely and lightly hold the key down, but not sort of grip that key like you have this like death grip on it, okay? That's kind of a topic for another video, but I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. So we want to actually experience this and see how we should be able to just play a note and very easily sort of circle with our wrist and our arm. So if it does feel tight, that's a problem. However, you also might experience that you feel like you're kind of gripping that key, and then all of a sudden you start circling and you just try to focus on moving and not tensing up and go, oh wow, actually, now I don't feel like I'm gripping that note. Both of these experiences, whichever one it is, they both can give us sort of a clue as to maybe what your issue could be, all right, at least one of your issues, but hopefully it can kind of show you where you could be playing the piano, okay? The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the muscles themselves. Muscles are meant to move, okay? This is something that you'll hear physical therapists say or massage therapists. And basically this concept is that when a muscle is in one position for a long time, it will get tense, it will get tight. Okay, so for instance, sometimes when I'm editing a lot of videos all the time and I'm sitting at my desk, and even if I'm maintaining good posture, so I'm not curving that lower part of my back, etc. Because my legs are in this position with my knees bent, these top muscles through here on my leg get so incredibly tight and tense, okay? Because again, that concept of muscles are meant to move. So it's not just a matter of if your muscles are in a bad position, okay? It's just simply if they're in one position for a very long period of time. Now this is especially compounded if you have problems with tension because you already have this underlying tension and then the muscles are stuck in that position where they're liable to start getting more and more tense. Now a quick caveat here, I'm not saying that if we play a note and sit in that position that we will have tension. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that if we play a lot where we're locked in a position, that will just naturally cause tension because the muscles are being held in stiff positions, okay? So we're going to talk about three concepts here and how these wrist motions or gestures can be helpful. So first of all, I just have to clarify what I mean by a wrist gesture. So the concept of a circle on the piano, okay? So I'm actually going to take my arm and my wrist and my hand and I'm just going to circle like this, okay? And what you'll notice is that my elbow and arm is circling and moving as well. But the most noticeable part here could be my wrist, and you can see it going over and under, as well as laterally, sort of circling like so on the keyboard, okay? So the first benefit to this is when we have long notes. So sometimes you'll see a long note like this, and you can kind of circle on that long note. And usually just one nice big circle like so to make sure we don't tense up. You can also see the same thing, or you can do the same thing when you have, let's say you have a big leap and a big melody note here. And I can just kind of circle there. This can help with sound production as well, because it's going to soften how we go into the key. So rather than, you know, that really harsh where I'm sort of just pounding into the key. So it has another benefit as well, but what we're talking about here essentially is circling so that everything is always moving, so I don't just go stiff position and then stiff position here. Okay, so again, it keeps everything moving. The second thing that we want to talk about is wide intervals. Okay, so whether this is an arpeggio, okay? Now, obviously in arpeggio, we don't have super wide intervals. We have thirds and then we have a fourth, okay? So that's not too bad. But that is going to tend to stretch the hand if we don't have some sort of motion. Because when we stretch the hand, right, that makes it harder to move the fingers. It means all of these muscles in my hand are activating to stretch the fingers out, and there's this underlying amount of tension. So when we circle, it keeps those muscles from needing to stretch the fingers as much, okay? Because notice that with that circle, my arm is sort of actually traveling up the keyboard, or of course, down the keyboard, okay? And this is more of like a sort of a half circle, swinging under and then up like so. But that's kind of basically the idea. Now also if we had another kind of thing. So let's say I have an octave like this. See how I'm going to kind of, I can circle under like that. And that helps move the arm, shift the arm to this top part so that I don't actually have to reach the fingers as much. So I don't have to, you know, place my hand over both keys and then play like this. This is also much harder to control those notes because again, our muscles are going to start tensing up instead of being a little bit more free to move. Now the third concept that I wanted to talk about is the concept of continual motion. Okay, so a little bit of background here. On every single joint that we have basically two opposing muscles, okay? And I'm going to avoid using technical terms, but essentially, let's take the elbow joint. There is a muscle here, and there's a muscle here. They're antagonist muscles, okay? So that means that whenever I hold this joint in a fixed position, both of those muscles are firing at the same time to hold the joint in a stable position. And if I go up with the arm and down with the arm, that's engaging both of those muscles to pull the arm up, pull the arm down, okay? So this is a concept of starting, going, say up, stopping, and then going back down and stopping, okay? This is very inefficient. Let's think about going laterally on the keyboard, okay? Let's say we have, you know, something like that where I'm going back and forth. Or we can actually take an arpeggio, just because I think it illustrates this well, okay? So if I go up, I could think about shifting up the keyboard and just going laterally, okay? So not using a circle, and I'm going up, stopping, and then back down. Stopping, and then back up, and then stopping, and then back down. So you can see, okay? Now, that could work, depending on the musical situation, okay? But I'm keeping this in a simple example so that it's easy to sort of see what I'm doing and sort of fully understand it for anyone who might be watching. Those starting and stopping points are very, very inefficient. So what if I could figure out a way to have a continual motion? And that's what's so beautiful about these wrist gestures, or this sort of circular, semicircular, elliptical movement, we could say, is that there is no start or stop. So if I start here, if I circle, when I get to that top, I just keep going. See, so I start at the bottom, I get to the top, and I just keep going. So see how beautiful that is, in that there's no starting and stopping. It is a continual motion sort of thing. Every time we play the piano, we can't do this, but when we have some sort of passage that we can use something like, say, an arpeggiated passage like that. Or there's many different examples that I could use, but when we have something like that, what that enables me to do is play that with a constant sort of motion, so that we have sort of, instead of those antagonist muscles engaging at the same time, which creates tension, instead we have just one continual motion. And you can actually just try that. Just take your arm and do this around the keyboard. And what you'll notice is that it's really easy. You shouldn't really feel like you get tired, okay? If you do feel like you get tired, it's probably because there is a certain amount of underlying tension, okay? But it's really, really easy. It's like, you know, you could just sit here and do this for a long time. Versus this, you'll start noticing that, okay, it's still pretty easy, but you'll notice that it feels a little bit more tense, especially the faster you go, the harder it is to continue going, okay? So we will come back in part 2 and talk about how these wrist gestures can also help play multiple voices in one hand, as well as just navigate through complex passages that would seem to be almost unplayable, but when we apply these concepts to them, they become really, really easy. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.